Good morning, and Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. It's my pleasure in this morning to be part of this program that the Islamic Society of North America have partnered with the Walid bin Talal Center of Muslim-Christian Understanding to address a very, very important issue. The issue about the religious minorities in the majority Muslims countries. And Islam as an organization have been working with many organizations of people of faith. In the past years, we have seen tremendous debate in the United States itself about the issue of religious minorities, from debate about Sharia, building the mosque, and many religious organizations have come to help of Muslims, and as a result, we have an organization called Shoulder to Shoulder of 27 religious organizations come together to help the Muslim community in America. And we realize that it is our moral responsibility to address the issue of minorities in the majority Muslim countries. And therefore, we started this effort by connecting to Muslim scholars and talking to different institutions to see how can we address this issue. And our topic today, or the discussion today, is a part of series of discussions will take place, inshallah, in the future to try to address this issue. I was part of a group, working group at Brookings Institute, where Shaykh Abdallah bin Bayyah and others were part of this group, and we discussed the issue of minority and majority Muslim countries in global context. And in that working group, we come to realize that there's so many issues that we need to deal with in addressing the issue of minorities of Muslims living in the West and minorities of religious minority living in the majority Muslim countries. And therefore, that is my pleasure today to have this wonderful group of scholars to address this issue today. And the first panel will be discussing the issue of pluralism and religious minorities in Islam, the historical legacy. And the speakers for this panel today, Shaykh Abdallah bin Bayyah, well-known Muslim scholar around the world, and he is the person who have written many articles and books in the issue of minorities, whether it's the issue of the Muslims minorities living in the West or the issue of minorities in the majority Muslim countries. Shaykh Abdallah bin Bayyah is a professor of Islamic studies and law, and he was the Minister of Justice in Mauritania, and he is the Vice President of the Union of Muslim Scholars today, a very strong body that address issue of the jurisprudence and Islamic law. And you have the next to him is the Dr. Jonathan Brown, and you have all of the bio of those speakers in your program. But Dr. Jonathan Brown is a professor here at Georgetown University, and he have written in the issue of the hadith science and Islamic law as well. And Dr. Jamal Badawi, next to him, is well-known Muslim scholars who have been teaching Islam in many university and platforms, but he is a professor of Islamic studies and economics in Canada, but also been known also for his work in interfaith work. And therefore, I would like to turn now the microphone Dr. Shaykh Abdallah bin Bayyah to address us. Thank you.
فقرة نعم فقرة الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.
I just want to remind you that Shaykh Abdallah bin Bayyah will speak in Arabic and Dr. Jonathan Brown will translate.
سأتحدث سريعا وأحاول أن أختصر ما استطعت في برقيات سريعة لأواصل ما استطعت من الرسالة. أولا أود أن أشكر الإخوة الذين دعوني هنا، وبخاصة أشكر فضيلة الإمام ماجد وزملائه على تنظيم هذه الندوة في صرح علمي عريق يقوم بدراسات تتسم بالدقة وبالانتشار أيضا في العالم لمساعدة الإنسانية على الخروج من أزماتها. لقد جئت هنا في رحلة علاجية، لكن لما دعيت هنا دعيت كطبيب معالج وليس كمريض معالج، فقلت لا بأس بذلك، إذن سأحاول أن أتطبب. الإنسانية تشكو من أمراض ومن آلام كثيرة. هذه الأمراض والآلام لا بد أن تستأثر باهتمامنا كرجال دين وكبشر وكأناس يحرصون على الإنسانية. قبل فترة مع زملاء اللي أنشأنا مركزا في المملكة المتحدة باسم المركز العالمي للتجديد والترشيد، حاولنا من خلاله التعاون مع أولي بقية كما جاء في القرآن الكريم: فلولا كان من القرون من قبلكم أولو بقية، يقول علماء أولو عقل وتمييز، أن نتصل بأولي بقية في الغرب حتى نتعاون على إطفاء الحريق. فنحن إذن إطفائيون، سمينا أنفسنا بهذا، نعتبر أن هذا قد يكون وظيفتنا أو أمنيتنا، نود أن نطفئ الحرائق التي ترب أطراف البشرية، أي تأكل وتستولي على أطراف البشرية. هذه المهمة جعلتني أستجيب لهذه الدعوة الكريمة لأشارك معكم هنا. تفضل.
يعني قصدتم أنتم أتيتم هنا لمعالجة طبية أصلا وبعد
نعم.
ذلك اشتركتوا في
نعم معالج ومعالج.
نعم.
المعالج باسم المفعول.
The Shaykh first he begins by praising God and the Prophet Muhammad, and he thanks everybody for their invitations, especially Imam Mohamed Magid and ISNA and Georgetown University, rich academic center. He came originally for medical treatment, but he's also coming to offer treatment as well, so offering some and taking some on the issues of the threats that sort of seem to be burning around the edges of the human community in general, and he's namely sort of threats of communal violence and misunderstanding. And he has spent time working in the UK on similar issues, and he has especially sought to identify groups from other religious communities who sort of who possess this common wisdom of God's message, and work with them in trying to face these challenges.
أتفاعلون هل ترجمت؟
نعم ترجمت.
طيب. سأتحدث في فقرتين. الفقرة الأولى عن منهجنا في التعامل مع القضايا، والفقرة الثانية عن مسألة الأقليات المختلفة دينا أو الطوائف المختلفة دينا في العالم الإسلامي، لأن هذا هو الاسم المفضل في الإسلام. اسم أقلية ليس معروفا كثيرا في الإسلام، لأن الإسلام ينظر إلى البشرية كوحدة. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا. والنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول: أيها الناس إن أباكم واحد، إن ربكم واحد، الناس لآدم وآدم من تراب، فلا فضل لعربي على عجمي. إذن الإسلام ينظر إلى البشرية كمجموعة واحدة وليس كمجموعات تتمثل في أقلية أو أكثرية، ولهذا ألغى ما يسمى بالأقلية العرقية، فهذا أمر محظور حتى في الشريعة، لا يجوز أن نصف مجموعة بأنها أقلية عرقية أو أقلية أثنية أو أقلية لغوية. كل هذه المفاهيم ألغاها الإسلام، وبالتالي نظر إلى الوحدة البشرية. إذن فأنا أفضل الطوائف التي تختلف دينيا في العالم الإسلامي. منهجنا في المعالجة هو منهج كلاسيكي، أي أنه تقليدي وليس ثوريا، ريفورميست إصلاحي. يجب أن نعترف بذلك في البداية، بمعنى أننا نعالج الموضوعات من خلال الشريعة، نعالج التطرف الديني بالتعمق الديني، أي نعالج الدين بالدين. ولهذا نتخذ من الأدوات المعروفة عند الأصوليين وعند المناطقة. هذه الأدوات هي التي نتعامل معها في الاستنباط من النصوص في تقديم الحجج والبراهين. فهذا المنهج من فوائده أنه منضبط. الفائدة الثانية أنه منضبط مرتبط بالتاريخ، ليس فيه انقطاع، هو مقنع أيضا للفئة المستهدفة. هو في النهاية وفي العمق سيصل إلى النتائج المصلحية المرجوة. فنحن لا نتحدث عن تاريخانية أو عن قطيعة، بل نتحدث عن استمرار عندما نحاول إيجاد حلول للقضايا المستجدة من الفكر الإسلامي. نركز على 3 أمور: على التأويل والتعليل والتنزيل.
التأويل والتعليم والتنزيل.
التأويل والتعليل interpretation، والتعليل بالفرنسية كوزاليتي موتيفيشن،
والتعليم
تنزيل
يعني تنزيل الآيات ولا تنزيل التعليل،
تنزيل الأحكام، تحقيق المناط application.
The Shaykh says he wants to discuss 2 points. The first is the issue of his methodology and the methodology of his school of thought. And the other one, which I'll discuss first, is the issue of minorities inside the Muslim world. And he says that in Arabic and the Islamic tradition, these are not called minorities. The word minority doesn't really exist, and it's an innovated new word in Arabic. What they would call them is tawa'if, basically kind of religious parties, different religious parties, or in the sense of group, not parties like college students have. And that's not his statement, that's my statement. Because Islam looks at people as all humanity as one unified group, with and he here quotes a Quranic verse that says, where God says, "We have only made you different tribes and peoples so that you may come to know one another." So people are one, but created with differences so that they might know one another. And he also cites a saying of the Prophet Mohammed that Adam was from dust, and and there's no Arabs are not better than non-Arabs, and non-Arabs are not better than Arabs. Everybody is equal racially. So there's no such thing as a racial minority in the Islamic tradition and the Sharia tradition. In fact, in the Sharia tradition, it's prohibited to discuss any one group as a racial minority. The second point is the point about the methodology that he follows. And this is, he says, a classical methodology. It's a methodology drawn from the Islamic tradition. It's not modern. It's not innovated. And it draws on the Sharia tradition and takes tools from it to address any one issue. It's a tradition that goes back continuously through Islamic history to the beginning of Islamic history, and there's never been any interruption in this tradition, and that it sort of never fails to, if followed properly, to deliver sought-after results. And it focuses on sort of 3 steps of of going back to the original sources of Islam to seek out how you're going to approach an issue. First, ta'wil, or the interpretation of the original sources of Islam, the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet. Second, seeing what the causes, what were the causes for a certain ruling or a certain approach that the Quran or the Prophet's Sunnah was taking, and then trying to figure out how to implement and pursue those causes in the modern period, in a new situation.
سيدي جمال، من استطاع منكم يعين أخاه فليفعل. استطعت أن تساعد في الأخ في بعض المصطلحات. أنا أرى هناك يعني أمامي أن الدقائق تحسب، فأرجوكم يعني شوية. Thank you for your hospitality. بهذه الأدوات، بالتأويل المقارب بمعنى وهو الذي يبحث عن المعاني الثانوية، يمكن أن نقدم أن نقول للظاهرية المتطرفة هذا ليس معنى النص، لأن التأويل يتعامل مع دلالات الألفاظ. بالتعليل يمكن أن نقول هذه ليست حكمة النص، لأن علة النص التعليل هو خارج النص. بالتنزيل يمكن أن نقول إن الواقع المعاصر لا يمكن أن ينزل عليه الحكم بهذه الطريقة. هذه ثلاث طرق باختصار شديد: التأويل والتعليل والتنزيل، لأن التنزيل هو تحقيق المناط وهو عبارة عن الواقع. لكن من الثلاثة، من التأويل والتعليل والتنزيل، نصوغ المفاهيم، création de concept، إنشاء خلق المفاهيم، ترميم المفاهيم، إصلاح المفاهيم، نصوغ مفاهيم جديدة لكونسبت أو كل جديد أو تعريف جديد للقضايا. مثلا مفهوم البيعة، ما هو مفهوم البيعة في الإسلام؟ القضايا السياسية مع الانتخابات هناك مفهوم جديد، عقد جديد، فنحن نصوغ المفاهيم الجديدة. ما هو مفهوم السلطة؟ ما هو مفهوم الطاعة؟ ما هو مفهوم المفاهيم الاقتصادية؟ ما هو مفهوم النقد الذي ليس هو ذهبا ولا فضة في مسألة الانفليشن، التضخم؟ يعني المفاهيم الجديدة نحاول صياغة المفاهيم كما يصوغ الفلاسفة المفاهيم، يصوغ أيضا الفقهاء المفاهيم. فعملنا في هذا المركز هو صياغة المفاهيم. صياغة المفاهيم بإمكانها أن تنزل على كل وضع جديد لإيجاد حلول جديدة. هذا هو المنهج. لكن بالنسبة لموضوع الأقليات، وهو موضوع بؤرة من بؤر التوتر، نحن نجمع النصوص. الإسلام فيه 4 خيارات، أوبشن. الخيارات هذه خيار حتى يقولوا لا إله إلا الله، خيار حتى يعطوا الجزية، خيار وإن جنحوا للسلم فاجنح لها. هذه خيارات 3 بعد الحرب، كما يقول القاضي أبو بكر العربي في كتابه القبس. لكن هناك خيار رابع، هو خيار المدينة، أي المدينة أو الدولة التي أهلها بعضهم يدين بدين وبعضهم يدين بدين آخر. هؤلاء تنطبق عليهم وثيقة المدينة، الدستور. عندهم عقد لا جزية فيه، هم متساوون يقومون بالدفاع عن مدينته. وهذا ما تنص عليه وثيقة المدينة التي تعتبر من أول دستور بين المسلمين وغير المسلمين في المدينة المنورة. إذن هناك 4 خيارات. نحن الآن سنراجع المفاهيم، يعني ما هو مفهوم أهل الذمة، ما هو مفهوم، هل الواقع اليوم العالمي، والواقع العالمي لم تعد فيها أقليات، لأن العالم أصبح مدينة واحدة مرتبطة بميثاق الأمم المتحدة الذي هو عبارة عن عقد جديد أو عن عهد جديد يجب الوفاء به، يا أيها الذين آمنوا أوفوا بالعقود. إذن هذه الخيارات 4 من خلالها نعالج هذه القضية في مؤتمرات قادمة سنقودها مع هؤلاء، تدخل في نطاق عملنا لخلق المفاهيم أو لترميم المفاهيم أو لصياغة المفاهيم الجديدة بالنسبة للفقه الإسلامي. هذا هو العمل الذي نقوم به. كلمة واحدة عن التاريخ. في التاريخ الإسلامي وقع أحيانا شطط في الممارسة، نحن نعترف بوقوع هذا مع الأقليات، لكن هناك وقفات تاريخية. سأذكر 3 وقفات وبسرعة. في القرن الثاني الهجري الثامن الميلادي في لبنان تمرد بعض اللبنانيين الذين ليسوا على دين الإسلام، فأنزل بهم الوالي العباسي عقوبة، وأنزل العقوبة حتى بأهل القرى التي في الجبال، فكتب له الإمام الشعبي: إن هذا لا يجوز لك، والله سبحانه وتعالى يقول: ولا تزر وازرة وزر أخرى، والنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول: من آذاهم فسيكون خصمه حجيجه يوم القيامة، فلا يجعدهم إلى ديارهم ولا تجلهم من ديارهم، عليك أن ترجع فورا. فرجع الوالي فورا وترك السكان اللبنانيين غير المسلمين في قراهم. ولهذا بعد موت الأوزاعي كان المسلمون والنصارى معا، المسيحيون كانوا جميعا في حالة من الحزن ويضعون الرماد على رؤوسهم، وما زال محترما عند المسيحيين وعند المسلمين. الموقف الثاني في القرن ال15 في فاس، عندما سقطت دولة أو أسقطت دولة المرينيين سلطان عبد الحق، وكان له وزيران يهوديان هما شاويل وأهارون. السلطان عبد الحق سقط في تلك الموقعة، واعتدى قام الناس بقيادة الإمام الورياقلي على الطائفة اليهودية في فاس. فالإمام زروق وهو من كبار علماء المالكية لم يصلي بعدها بالإمام الورياقلي، ووصفه بالقدر، فكان يقول: يا غندر. فهذه الوقفة من إمام كالإمام سيدي أحمد زروق وقفة عظيمة جدا، لأنه انتصر للطائفة اليهودية في فاس، واعتبر أن الاعتداء عليها هو من باب خفر للذمة، أي خروج عن المنهج الإسلامي. الموقف الثالث تعرفونه، موقف عبد القادر الجزائري المجاهد، عبد القادر الجزائري الأمير عبد القادر الجزائري في دمشق حين حمى الأقلية المسيحية. هذه المواقف 3 في التاريخ تدل على أن المسلمين إذا وقع شطط ما فإن العلماء لهذا الشطط بالمرصاد لإعادة حقوق الأقلية أو الطائفة إليها كاملة غير منقوصة. لي كلام كثير لكن تفضل.
السؤال هو الإمام الشعبي ولا الأوزاعي؟
الأوزاعي. الإمام عبد الرحمن أبو عمرو الأوزاعي، وهو نظير مالك.
Okay.
سيدي Jamal, أعن أخاك.
Yeah, I'm just trying to. Oh, okay. Sorry. Here we go. So basically, when you look at the issue of tanzil, ta'wil, ta'lil, wa tanzil, we have to use these tools to basically reconsider and reformulate the way we think about modern concepts in the Islamic tradition. From ta'wil, the interpretation of the text, we know that any kind of severe or, let's say, overly strict or rigid interpretations of these texts cannot be the correct interpretations. And we look at ta'lil and we try to determine what the actual intentions of these scriptural, extrapolate the intentions of these texts, the Quranic text or the text of the sayings of the Prophet Mohammed. And then the concept of tanzil, we take it and we try and apply these causes, these original intentions of the lawmaker, God and the Prophet, to a modern situation. And through this technique, we actually kind of recreate, we reform the way we think about important concepts. For example, the concept of Bayyah, or political loyalty and allegiance. We reconsider, what does it mean, what is the concept of authority in the modern state? What is the concept of allegiance to that authority? What are important economic concepts like currency, money, value? These things all have to be looked at through this Islamic framework that he's proposing. For example, he gives the example of dealing with how Muslims originally dealt with other religious groups. They tended to look at things through the framework of confrontation and war. And if the Muslims were making war on another group, there were certain choices that the other group had in terms of becoming Muslim or surrendering and becoming a minority under the Muslim rule. But he says there's actually a fourth option, which we find if we go back to the Islamic tradition and reconsider it, which is essentially, I would say, the option of religious pluralism. And he gives us an example of this, what is called the Constitution of Medina. When the Prophet Mohammed moved to Medina in the year 622 of the Common Era, he established a polity there that consisted not only of Muslims, but also of pagan Arabs and Jews. They were actually Jewish Arabs. I know that sounds very odd to say, but they were Jewish Arabs. And these group actually called itself one ummah, one community that would make war together and make peace together, and it would have would be a common polity. And he says this is really one of the first constitutions in history, and the first constitution in the Islamic tradition, which can be looked back to as a model for thinking about religious pluralism today. And we need to, for example, the modern world today presents realities that Muslims hadn't considered previously. For example, the United Nations and the idea that countries have pacts and agreements with one another, multilateral agreements. And this is now the sort of presumed status quo for international affairs, completely changes the way that the reality that the Sharia tradition has to deal with. And so Muslims need to go back to that tradition properly and then kind of look at use its tools to recreate its ideas on how to deal with issues of politics and economy. Now he says he wants to say something brief about examples in history. He says in history there have been instances when Muslims fell short of the ideals that the Sharia tradition put forward for dealing with religious minorities. But he also gives examples of when sort of the Islamic ideals really were on display in their, I guess, most pristine form. The first one is in the 700s of the Common Era. An Abbasid governor in what's now Lebanon, governor of the Abbasid Caliphate. Basically, there was some Christians in the area rebelled against the Abbasids, and the governor sort of was very harsh in his punishment and expelled some people from their homes. And the Imam al-Awza'i, who was he's buried in Beirut. His tomb is still there. He wrote a letter to the governor reprimanding him and saying, you can't do this because, to the Abbasid governor, yeah, because no one should be held accountable for things done by others. The Quranic principle that you can't hold people who had nothing to do with a certain crime accountable for the crimes committed by others. And the governor immediately obeyed him and ceased all reprisals against the Christian community. And that's why he says Imam al-Awza'i is revered today by Muslims and Christians alike in Beirut. And when he died, Muslims and Christians were both saddened by his death. The second example is in 15th century Fez in Morocco, when the Marinid dynasty fell. There were two prominent...
1464.
Okay. In 1464. This is when this happened. There were two Jewish viziers who were prominent members of the dynasty, basically, the sort of administration of the dynasty. And because of their prominence, there was sort of resentment from some people in the Muslim community in Fez, and some people actually attacked the Jewish community in Fez. And a very famous Sufi scholar and a jurist named Ahmed Zarruq, Shaykh Ahmed Zarruq, actually spoke out against this attacks on the Jewish community there and demanded that they cease, because he said this is an attack on their, a group that is a protected minority amongst us, and we can't do this.
الإمام الذي قاد الثورة ضد اليهود.
هو ما صلى
لم يصلي وراءه.
He actually, Imam Shaykh Ahmed Zarruq refused after that to pray behind the religious leader who had led the attack on the Jews, because he considered him to be somebody who had basically rebelled against the proper order. So that's the extent to which Ahmed Zarruq rejected this attack on the Jewish community. And finally, he gives the example of Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, the famous sort of anti-colonial Algerian warrior who was first in Algeria, and then after he was defeated, he moved to Damascus. And he was famously in Damascus, he actually intervened in instances of communal violence between Christians and Muslims and protected the Christian minority. And the Shaykh doesn't say this, but he was actually honored for this both in France and in the United States in absentia for his role in preventing interfaith violence.
تعطوني ثواني سكوند. في النهاية استعمال الدين هو كاستعمال الطاقة. نيرجي. استعمال الطاقة ممكن أن تصنع منها الرخاء والخضرة والماء والخصبة والحياة، لكن يمكن أن تصنع منها أيضا قنابل مدمرة تؤدي إلى الخراب وإلى الاحتراب. فالتدين هو هكذا صناعة الدين. نحن نحاول أن نكون ممن يصنع الخصبة والحياة بدلا من الخراب والدمار. نريد أن نتعاون مع الجميع، مع من يؤمن بهذه الأفكار، حتى نواصل البشرية إلى السلام. وقد لا نستطيع، لكن علينا أن نحاول. وأشكركم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
The Shaykh just wants to add one last point, and that is that using religion is like using energy. Religion is like energy. You can use energy to desalinize water. You can use it to grow fruits and vegetables, to create fertility and production. But you can also use energy to create bombs and instruments of death that lead to destruction. And he says, the word he used, tadayyun, it's almost like religiosity. People being religious, not religion, but people being religious. That notion of people that sort of religiosity is like this. It can be used for positive or for negative, for healthy, productive purposes or for destructive ones. And he seeks to advance, obviously, the productive and healthy uses of religion that will lead to peace for all of mankind. And although we might not be able to succeed in that, we must certainly try our best to do so. And he thanks you very much.
Great. Now, I will turn to Jonathan Brown, Dr. Jamal Badawi, sorry, and then Dr. Brown will be following Dr. Jamal Badawi.
الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى سائر أنبياء الله. All praise is due to Allah, the sole creator, sustainer and cherisher of the universe. And may his peace and blessing be upon his last prophet Muhammad and upon all prophets who preceded him, also all those who follow their rightly guidance until the day of judgment. I greet you with the greeting of all of the prophets in its most complete form. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, which means may the peace, blessing and mercy of Allah be with you all. And I thank you all for your invitation, and thank all of you also for showing up this morning. The title of my humble contribution to this symposium is Plurality and, between brackets, numerical minorities, numerical religious minorities. I learned a lesson, continue to learn. Well, I wish I have been able to share this PowerPoint with you, but of course the layout does not allow it, so I can communicate it to you. What I'd hope to do is first to begin with a brief introduction, but the really major issue or two issues I'm addressing. One, very briefly, which is the notion of plurality and diversity from an Islamic point of view. I don't say always Islamic unless it's something unanimous, but I'm trying to be cautious enough to say it's from an Islamic perspective. But the major discussion really would focus on the objectives of Sharia as the real protection of minority rights. This is really the thrust of the whole presentation and a brief conclusion. In the introduction, subhanAllah, I have it here in my PowerPoint. I heard it also from Dr. Vol, that we are living in an interdependent, interrelated global village where there's a great deal of abuse of religion, in the sense that our Shaykh also is mentioning, using it for destruction rather than motivating people to do good. And that is especially true in times of turmoil. Therefore, there is a dire need for dialogue, interfaith dialogue, and intra-faith dialogue within each community. There is a dire need for civic and political engagement among all in order to help work together in cooperation to solve humanity's problem. Now, a brief remark on the first issue, plurality and diversity. In my humble reflection, plurality and diversity is inherent in everything in creation. We find diversity in the cosmic order. We find diversity on earth, the eco-balance, eco-diversity, which is necessary for the sustenance of life. But that applies as well to human beings, whether we're speaking about diverse ethnic group, linguistic group, national groups, and of course our focus today, that is religious plurality. That's the one we focus on, and most of the time, limited time will be devoted to that. My humble contention is that while I'm not getting into the Sharia and the grave mistakes and misperception about what Sharia is, reduced to penal law, reduced to Islam. In fact, the Quran in chapter 42 used the term that is coming from the same root from which Sharia came to describe the message of the great five prophets, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. Shara'a lakum min ad-din. So Sharia is not only for Muslims. It is, in essence, not the detailed laws. In essence, it is the way, because literally Sharia means a path. So in a religious sense, Sharia is the path that leads us to Allah, whether we are Muslim, Christian, or Jews, because the core message of all of the Prophet has been one and the same. So my contention basically is that if we look at the maqasid of Sharia, not details that can change with the change of time and place, but the supreme objective of Sharia, its ethical and moral orientation, which a lot of people other than Muslims can also accept and find it resonating with them. That these five or six, actually now some people add a sixth objective of Sharia, is not only intended for Muslims, but for all, because the message of the Quran, when it deals with human beings, it is universal, except for areas that are specific to Muslim, like their prayer and fasting. Now, but in the very outset, I'd like to make it clear. Number one, Sharia is not what Muslims have done, are doing, or will do. Not necessarily. It's not identical. Sharia comes from Allah. It's perfect because Allah is perfect, if we really understand it. Human beings, Muslims or otherwise, are imperfect human beings. They come close or far away from those ideals. Whether those who abide or not abide by Sharia or go totally against Sharia are individuals, groups, or states, for that matter. A second point, that Sharia is not identical with judicial ruling in general or with a specific fatwa. These are often mistaken, and sometimes I have my reservation even on the term Sharia law, because sometimes when we speak in the terms of law, we speak about some detailed laws, but that's not what Sharia really is all about. In the Arabic terms, it is mixing up the term Sharia with fiqh, which means jurisprudence. There's no time to elaborate on that, but I just want to make it clear in my mind at least. Thirdly, that as classical jurists put it very clearly, that ultimately, if you want to summarize what Sharia intends to do, they used a very beautiful sentence, جلب المنافع ودفع المضار, to bring benefits and well-being to humans and to remove the harms. And now some people think that Sharia is a monster. The ultimate end of Sharia is to bring prosperity and goodness to humans and remove or at least mitigate some of the harms that happens to them. That's the essence of it. These are manifest or embodied in the 5 common, or let's say 6 main or supreme objective of Sharia. And I'd like for you to think as I'm speaking as to whether you can relate to that in principle, not in details or application. The first one, and that is actually the first in the hierarchy, that Sharia is about protection of faith. Faith here does not mean Muslims, as some people may think. And the evidence comes right from the Quran itself. When the Quran speaks about God or Allah in Arabic, actually it speaks about the God of all. So it's not some people fighting on behalf of their God about some other God. God is the Lord and Creator of all. When the Quran speaks about the mission of all prophets, it is generic Islam, achieving peace with Allah, inner peace and peace with all creation of Allah, humans, animals, vegetation, ecology, through willing and loving and trusting submission to the Creator, something I think resonates with many believers, especially in the Abrahamic faith. So when we talk about protection of faith, then we're not talking only about Muslims. The Quran is more explicit even. And it's not in verse 256, the famous one in chapter 2, let there be no compulsion or coercion in religion. There are many, many other ayat in the Quran emphasizes the same thing. That is protection of faith, of a Muslim, of a Christian, even idolatrous person, because idolatry is mentioned in the Quran as deen, lakum dinukum. This is your religion or way of life. Even idolaters are regarded as having deen. All are entitled to the protection of what appeal to their conscience, their heart, and their mind. But the Quran goes beyond that to even mandates the protection, not just to recognize they can believe, but you cannot practice. You can practice your faith, and the Quran speaks about actually the protection of places of worship and begins with places of worship of other than Muslims even. Not only this, it goes beyond that to invoke, encourage the interfaith dialogue in peace and respect among all to discover the common ground, and there are many. But there is something that you don't find even in modern democracies, that there is special consideration are given to religious minorities concerning their personal law, that they don't have to follow the law of the land. Not when criminal law, crime is a crime. In the matter that is so much attached to religion like the personal law. The second is protection of human life. And when the Quran speaks about human life, it speaks in an inclusive way, not only the lives of Muslims. Jurists said that protection of life is not only to protect from murder. Actually, it is to provide also for the necessities of life and also to prescribe certain punishment for those who aggress about the lives of others, but the rule of evidence is very high, and the family of the deceased may forgive, and the person will not be, for example, punished for murder. Something, again, that does not exist in our contemporary legal system, forgiveness on the part of the family. The third one is to protect mind and reason, both on the positive and negative sense. Positively, by encouraging people to seek knowledge, to demand evidence, not to just be misled by myth or unsubstantiated claims. And that might be at the root, perhaps, of the emergence of Islamic civilization and its immense contribution to humanity. They were motivated, actually, by the Quran, as I argued in a different paper. But also on the negative side, Islam prohibited anything that beclouds and ultimately destroy the power of reasoning, the greatest gift of Allah, the mind. Fourthly, to protect the family or progeny as the cornerstone of society, there are rules about equality, full equality between the genders, equity in terms of role differentiation, but interdependence between both, about marriage as love, peace, and compassion, child protection morally and otherwise. The fifth is to protect property, the right to work and earn, acquire wealth and use it legitimately and morally, teaching against all forms of cheating and injustice. But it requires also fulfillment of the basic needs of people before you punish. And there are numerous examples in history about that. The sixth and the final one, the protection of human dignity, or ird. This is also derived from the Quran, from the concept of dignity of the human. And dignity, as mentioned in the Quran, is not the exclusive right of Muslims. It says, Bani Adam. Allah says, we ennobled the children of Adam, which includes everybody, even those who reject Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or believe in Him. Protection of ird, then, or human dignity, includes protection of reputation of the individual from slander and false accusation or character assassination, and also to provide for equitable social order and well-being of all. Just to conclude, very quick points. One, diversity and plurality is part of God's will in all creation. Two, theological truth statements in the Quran, like other religious scriptures of other religion, should not be forced on anyone or used as a pretext for persecution, violence, or injustice. Thirdly, failings and deviation by Muslims is their own responsibility, not to be blamed on Islam, not on Sharia, which actually is for the good of humanity. Fourth and finally, there is a great and dire need for fair, objective, and comprehensive evaluation, even when we come to evaluation of historical practices of any community of faith, Muslims and otherwise, looking at the positive things without romanticizing one's history, but without denigrating that history and see nothing but the isolated cases of wrong that was done. We thank you very much for your attention. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Now I will introduce Dr. Jonathan Brown to give his contribution.
Thank you very much. And certainly thank you to ISNA for helping to organize this. I wanted to just speak briefly about the tremendous diversity of experience in Islamic civilization, the tradition of those countries and those states and areas of the world that have, either had Muslim states or Muslim majority populations. So what I'll present to you is sort of a tour of that diversity from place to place and time to time. Now, in general, the general principle that sort of the Sharia envisioned and Muslim states envisioned for religious minorities was that those religious minorities would submit to the Islamic State, pay tribute, basically pay taxes like everybody, and in return they'd be protected, they could practice their own religion, and they could eternal laws. This is the general idea. This is based on something that supposedly happened when the Muslims conquered Jerusalem in the year 637, the end of 636, early 637 of the Common Era. The Caliph Omar, the second Caliph, the ruler of the Muslim polity, basically struck an agreement with the Bishop of Jerusalem. And this agreement, it's sort of unclear if it really happened or not or what its exact shape was, but it's generally been handed down as kind of that template for how the rules by which religious minorities would abide in the Islamic polity. One, there would be no new churches or no repairs to churches, to houses of worship. There would be no processions with crosses. The religious minorities could keep their own religion and their own laws. They would not proselytize to Muslims. they could not ride horses or animals when Muslims were walking, and they could not possess weapons. And finally, that the religious minorities would wear certain distinct clothing. It's very interesting. People often discuss these rules, and some people call it dhimmiization. People say that the Muslim states and sort of the Sharia and Muslim community overall wants to reduce minorities to this status. But what's very interesting is if we look at throughout Islamic history and across its great geographical and chronological diversity, we see that there's almost none of these things are actually applied in any uniform way. So, for example, on the issue of there not being any new houses of worship, it's very interesting that in the Ottoman Empire, in cities like Istanbul, we have records from the 1400s and the 1500s, court records, of Christians and Jews leaving their estates, their personal estates in their wills, to be donated to the church, or actually to be turned into churches or synagogues. So they would actually, a wealthy Jewish merchant, for example, would leave his house to be converted into a synagogue. And the fascinating thing is, they would get these wills certified in the Islamic Sharia courts. They would actually go to the Sharia courts to certify these because ultimately in the Islamic states, the only person with a police force who could actually implement rules was the Muslim government. So if you really wanted your document to be firm and legally uncontestable, you had to go to the Sharia court to get it done. So we have Jews actually creating new synagogues and getting that verified in Sharia court. This interesting idea of there being no minority religious processions, I can think of a very interesting instance that goes against this. This is from an English traveler who in the mid-1600s is traveling through India, and he records how one Mughal official, so an imperial official of the Muslim Mughal dynasty, which ruled all of India from around 1526 to basically the mid-1700s. He says that he describes this Mughal official sitting in his canopied chariot, sort of, I can imagine him munching on whatever the snack of the day was. And he's actually sitting and observing this famous annual procession of the Jagannath Hindu temple's idol being dragged down the street in this giant, ornate, decorated cart towards the temple. And he was sort of sitting there in the capacity as the Mughal official who was observing this religious ceremony. So he was actually there and supporting it. Were non-Muslims allowed to keep their own laws and practice their own religion? Yes, in general. In fact, what's very interesting is that a lot of the time, the main concern of the religious minorities was actually that their flocks, their constituencies, were going to the Islamic courts and not the religious courts of that minority. So, for example, Christians and Jews in Iraq and Egypt in the 800s and the 900s were constantly issuing religious edicts to their communities, condemning people for going out and actually having their marriages certified and their property deeds certified and dealing with disputes within the community in the Islamic courts. Because again, the Islamic courts actually had the capacity to enforce rulings, whereas the Jewish and Christian courts could only threaten people with excommunication, basically. This interesting idea of Muslim minorities not being able to ride horses or carrying weapons, or really being able to be in any position of authority over Muslims. Also, we see that this is not always the case. One Muslim scholar who was actually traveling through northern North Africa, the city of Tlemcen, in what's now, I think Tlemcen's in Algeria or Morocco, I can't remember. Algeria. Tlemcen in Algeria. He's actually writing and complaining about how on his caravan, the Jewish merchants are riding on horses right next to the Muslim merchants, and he's very upset about this. He's sort of a more, I guess, closed-minded example of a Muslim scholar. When it came to authority over Muslims, as Shaykh Abdallah already mentioned, sometimes non-Muslims could rise to the very top of Muslim state administrations. For example, in the famous city of Granada in Andalusia, the Jewish vizier Samuel bin Nagrila and his son became so powerful that he was named the first minister of the Zirid dynasty's court. He was actually the grand vizier, and his son took his position after him. What about weapons? What about non-Muslims and religious minorities possessing weapons? Well, sometimes Muslim states needed these weapons. They actually needed the armies of non-Muslim minorities. And the case in which this was clearest was the great Mughal Empire in India. This class of Hindu warrior kings who ruled in the majestic mountaintop fortresses of Rajasthan, this group known as the Rajputs, they were an absolutely integral part of the Mughal army. And even under the Mughal emperor Aurangzeb, who in Indian history is usually seen as this sort of fundamentalist, sort of intolerant Muslim ruler, he actually appointed Rajput Hindu generals and administrators to the top ranks of his army and imperial administration. Now, were Muslim minorities always kept safe? Were non-Muslim minorities always kept safe? Not always. And most often, when they were harmed or killed, it was for the same reasons that minorities suffer everywhere or anywhere. Because of scapegoating, because of resentment for their success, because of perceptions of them being an enemy fifth column. And of course, all this would be dressed up in the language of religious righteousness. Sometimes non-Muslim minorities suffered due to the intolerance or madness of just a few influential individuals. Examples of these cases, for example, in Egypt in the 1320s, when Egypt was ravaged by one of the many attacks of the bubonic plague, the Black Death, that ravaged Egypt and Syria as well as Europe. A lot of people don't know this, causing tremendous death and destruction in those areas throughout the 1300s and 1400s. In the 1320s, there were actually sort of riots and massacres of Coptic Christians in Egypt because the population was just so unsettled by this plague, and they took it out on the Coptic population. That same Muslim scholar who was riding in Tlemcen and complained about Jews riding next to Muslims on horseback, when he arrived in an oasis town in the Sahara Desert on his way to sub-Saharan Africa, he actually riled up the Muslims in that town to go and kill some of the Jewish inhabitants of the town. But actually he had to flee the city after that because he was going to be sought by the local magistrate, and he fled actually farther south to cause trouble elsewhere. In Granada, the power of that great Jewish vizier and his son caused such great resentment amongst the Muslim elites that in late 1066, the year 1066 of the Common Era, a number of Jews in the city were senselessly killed. And finally, an example of the destruction that just one disturbed individual can cause, in the year 1009 and 1010, after centuries of Christian pilgrims visiting Jerusalem in peace and visiting the holy Christian places in Jerusalem peacefully, the mad Fatimid Caliph, the dynasty that was ruling Egypt and Syria at the time, named Al-Hakim, ordered the Church of the Holy Sepulchre to be destroyed. And this is actually one of the causes of the First Crusade. So the story of religious minorities in Islamic civilization is not one story at all. It's not a history that can be told as either one of ideals and enlightened realities or of consistent oppression. It's the story of millions of merchants, peasants, warriors, kings, and clerics living in all the stunning diversities of a discordant world stretching from Senegal to Malaysia, from Sudan to the steppes of Russia. Peoples and polities protected or exploited one another for every reason we can think of, idealistic and cynical. So we need to stop treating this history as one that can be told in any one light. Thank you.
Now, we're given now the responsibility, actually, I need to keep the time. Dr. Sunusi, how much time do I have? 20 minutes for the question and answer. Okay. 25 minutes is generosity. So 20 minutes become 25 minutes, which is good. I think we're doing well, still with the time. I would like to thank the panelists for the very informative presentation that maybe have triggered a lot of thought. And Dr. John, if you're like, I give it to you first if you'd like anything to say. Yeah.
Only to emphasize the importance, I think, of what Shaykh Abdallah reminded us, and as we can see in the other two presentations, and that is, at this point, we need to really look not just at the description of what's going on, but how we think about what's going on and the importance of methodology and our concepts and the whole idea of the goal, the maqasid of Sharia. And we've gotten historical background, but it might be worthwhile to pursue a little bit more the specific applications in contemporary 21st century society.
Do you want him to?
To comment or?
هل نعلق
And what I would suggest is that maybe we take 3 or 4 questions or
together,
soliciting comments, and then let them each.
ماذا أقول؟
Thank you. يقول خلينا نسمع 3 4 تعليقات وبعدين نعلق عليهم أسئلة.
طيب.
نعم. Yes, please.
My opinion is that, thank you, Islam has been hijacked by certain persons that are seeking power and wealth at the same time. And my question is, why did that happen and how can we cure it? Thank you.
The second. Actually, go ahead.
Oh.
I was pointing to her there, but it's fine.
So you go. You go next.
Thank you for your presentation. I guess my question is that this was historical development of how Islam has been gentle to other religious minority. But unfortunately, my experiences, says other way. I'm from Iran, and when Islam invaded Iran, they actually forced Zoroastrian to give up their religion. If not, they would have either been killed or they had to go to Bombay or some other place. But that's my historical view of what happened. And then coming to the present, 21st century, Mohammed declares himself to be the last prophet. Then what happens with other religions which are being, established after him? Like the Baha'is in Iran. Are they going to have the rights? Or like as we see it right now in Iran or elsewhere in Arabic country, in Muslim country, they are being prosecuted. They can't even have the right to go have education.
Thank you. I would like as you ask a question, just identify yourself and affiliation will be helpful. Okay, any other questions? We're going to take 3 and, Muslim like 3 things. Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
I very much appreciate all your guys' very positive remarks today. Just wanted to get your thoughts on how do you rectify different hadiths like Bukhari that have authorized the killing of apostates, or the legal opinion of Al-Azhar University that has supported the killing of apostates, and even the spiritual director of the Muslim Brotherhood who has said that those hadiths are accurate. And then why haven't you seen more Muslim legal scholars and reformists in America sign on to the Freedom Pledge put forth by former Muslims United repudiating the punishment of apostates? Thanks.
Yes, you. Okay, now they said 4th. I was going with the 3, but they said we need 4. Make it even.
Shukran jazilan. Actually, my question is to all of you, maybe, especially for Ustad Abdallah bin Bayyah. Ma ra'yukum an Professor Mohamed Shahrur, when he said that read the Quran as if it is just revealed last night, and also
as if what?
Just revealed last night, and Ibn Arabi, the Shaykh al-Akbar, also he's saying that the word of the Quran not to mention about the verses and also the chapters, has an infinite meaning, and all of it are, intended by God. So he said that when the meaning repeats itself for someone reciting the Quran, he has not recited it as it should be recited, and that's sign of ignorance. And then my question also is it possible, because you are teaching in Saudi Arabia, is it possible for Saudi Arabia to have multiple interpretation? Thank you.
Okay. Now we'll take the answers from the panelists. Dr. Jamal? Dr. Jamal,
I'd like to address two of these points at least. One, the experience of our sister here in Iran. I think we all made it quite clear that Islam is not the equivalent of Muslims. And Dr. Brown has indicated also that you're talking about a vast history of 14 centuries. There are ups and downs, and we all of us admitted there is positive and negative. The ma'yar, or the criterion for that, is the Quran and sound hadith of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Anyone who violates that, of course, he's outside of that. I personally believe that today's Baha'is are entitled to practice their own Baha'ism. And when I was speaking also about one of the objectives of Sharia in terms of preservation of reason, I said that applies to Muslim and non-Muslim. So the onus is on those who violate that. But I think I have to remind myself also and everyone, we should never romanticize the history or only pick on the negative part of history, denigrating everything. We need to get the total picture and compare one community versus the other community only in relative terms, not that one were angelic, one was devilish. The second observation about the apostasy, a question of apostasy. For your information, of course, the methodology of interpretation in Islam has to go, number one, to the Quran, which is the source of sources. Second to that would be sound hadith. But since the Quran takes the priority being in Muslim belief, the word of God verbatim, not just the inspiration in meaning, it takes priority over hadith also, and any hadith or saying of the Prophet ﷺ, attributed saying, has to be interpreted only in the light of the Quran. On the question of apostasy, there is no single verse in the Quran that says you give an apostate punishment in this life. If you know one, correct me. Not a single one. Secondly, there is something opposite to that, and I did mention and allude to that earlier. There are numerous verses in the Quran that speak about freedom of conscience and freedom of belief. And as such, let's not just go to opinions of people, to the Quran itself, that everyone is entitled, even to his shirk. Even idolatrous Arabs were recognized as a deen, according to Surah Al-Kafirun, Surah 109 in the Quran. Secondly, when you go to this hadith also, it is very important not to pick and choose. It is very important to bring all ahadith that deal with one subject and put it together. There have been ahadith that has been, in my view, misinterpreted to mean that anyone who lives Islam should be killed. In fact, some of the ahadith, if you take a broader view on this, actually connect that kind of punishment with the commission, in addition to apostasy, with some other capital crime. Like the hadith about Uqal and Urayna, they apostated, but then they killed the shepherds and armed robbery and murder, so they were punished not really for their apostasy, but for joining that with another capital crime. Thirdly, there are several hadith also in the Sahihain, and that's in the two most authentic sources of hadith, that negate the notion of killing the person just on the basis of his belief that Islam is no longer good for him or her. In fact, it mentioned the story of a man who came to Medina to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he wanted to go back on Islam, to apostate actually, atahallala min ahdi. And the Prophet did not answer him in any way. The man went in safety, came back the second day, made the same request. The Prophet ordered no action against him. Some narrations of that hadith or version say that he came for the third day. But again, the Prophet didn't know anything. The man apparently was not intent or did not commit any criminal punishment. So it says he packed and left Medina. The Prophet didn't send anyone to catch him and bring him so that he faces justice and to apply the rule of Allah. He left him. He said, Medina, expel its impurity, just like the fire expel the impurities from the metal. He went in peace. He was left to go in peace. Now, the last part of your question, why don't Muslim scholars address that? They have addressed that. Even a small student of the students of scholars like myself has written an article on that subject. It has been published already, and the same research paper was presented also in Arabic with some expansion in the last meeting of the European Council of Fatwa and Research, and I'm not the only one. Sheikh Rashid Rida have written about the same thing. Other scholars, contemporary scholars, also have the same type of view. So again, if we get to the proper methodology, then we don't look at the fact that the majority of scholars have interpreted that. They're not infallible, nor they claim to be infallible. Remember Imam Shafi'i, one of the giants, who says, my opinion is right but could be wrong, the other opinion is wrong but could be right. I think we need to look at things really in greater depth, in more comprehensive way, but above all, using the proper methodology, and the absolute priority go to the main revelatory sources, the Quran, then the sound hadith, but opinions of the scholars can be evaluated. And Shaykh bin Bayyah addressed the whole issue in terms of interpretation, in terms of the causality or effective causality, and also in the isqat, the application of ruling in a given reality. I'd be glad to send you an electronic copy or anyone else for that. By the way, the whole paper actually, even though it needs more development and expansion, is available on the site of the Fiqh Council of North America. I think the site is fiqhcouncil.org, I believe. So we search more, inshallah, we can learn together.
Shaykh Abdallah.
I mean, I just wanted to respond briefly to the question about Zoroastrianism. I mean, I'm not familiar with this claim that Zoroastrians were forced to leave Iran and go to India. I mean, I've been myself to Zoroastrian fire temple in Yazd in central Iran. Saw plenty of Zoroastrians milling about doing minding their own business in Yazd. In addition, I mean, actually, it was quite the opposite. The Zoroastrians who converted to Islam, had to beg to get the actual proper treatment of Muslims because the Muslim government didn't want them to be paying less taxes, so they refused to acknowledge their conversion. And they actually, we have a historical record in the 750s of the Common Era, 100 years after the conquest of Iran. Finally, an Abbasid governor was sent out to northern Iran to hear the complaints of people who said, we've converted to Islam, our parents converted to Islam, and we're still having to pay non-Muslim taxes. Why, you have to remedy this situation. So it's actually quite the opposite. They weren't getting the proper treatment as Muslims by the Abbasid government. In addition, I mean, I can just think of one example, a Zoroastrian in Baghdad in the 1000s who came up to a Muslim scholar and said he had a dream about the Prophet Mohamed and wanted to become Muslim. So I'm just using this as an example that the Zoroastrians walking around Baghdad in the mid-1000s, they certainly weren't all driven anywhere. And on the issue of, I think this idea of Islam being hijacked really depends on your perspective, okay? Because it's like people saying, why don't Muslim scholars speak out against violence? I can't think of any Muslim scholar who hasn't spoken out against violence. I mean, I think Muslim scholars, Muslim community leaders in general are just exhausted, repeating themselves over and over again, condemning terrorism, condemning violence. Yusuf al-Qaradawi, Shaykh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, Shaykh Ali Jum'ah, these are all people who've condemned killing apostates, who said that these hadiths have been misunderstood. And I mean, the idea of Islam being hijacked, it only is a true statement if you come from a perspective where you just watch kind of what the Western news channels tell you about Islam. Of course, only bad news shows up on those channels. And you think that somehow this represents the continuity or the plurality of Muslims. The reality is the vast majority of Muslims in the Muslim world, Islam hasn't been hijacked. They're just going about their daily lives trying to make money and feed their kids.
الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. الإخوة ربما أجابوا عن بعض القضايا التي كان ينبغي أن أتحدث عنها. ربما أحاول أن أكرر أو أحاول أن ألون تقريبا بعض الأشياء التي قالوها ينصي بعض الأشياء التي ذكروها. كان السؤال الأول يتعلق بكيف تطبيق الشريعة. أعتقد البروفيسور براو تكلم عن كيفية تطبيق الشريعة. طبعا هذه قضية تحتاج إلى بحث كبير، ونحن نشتغل منذ سنة الآن على ورشات متتالية لنرى كيف تطبق الشريعة في القرن ال15، القرن ال21، وبالتالي الشر والواقع تغير كثيرا، والشريعة دائما تراعي مصالح الناس كما يقول الشاطبي: الشريعة جاءت لمصالح الخلق. فكيف تطبق الشريعة في هذه الظروف؟ تطبيق الشريعة هو يخضع لمعادلات فنية. هذه المعادلات تمثل كما قلنا في التأويل والتعليل والتنزيل، وتمثل كذلك في الواقع الذي يعيشه الناس في تحقيق المصالح، لأن قد تطبق حكما لا يحقق مصلحة، يحقق مفسدة أكثر من مصلحة، وبالتالي عليك أن لا تطبق هذا الحكم، عليك أن يكون تطبيق الشريعة هو عكس تطبيق هذا الحكم. فهذا الذي نحاول أن يفهمه الناس، بأن التطبيق ليس معناه الحرفية، ليس معناه تطبيق الحرفي، ليس معناه الحرفية في التطبيق. فالحرفيون والظاهريون هم الذين أدوا إلى مشاكل، قالوا الحكم بغير ما أنزل الله كفر، بينما الصحابة أولوا الآية من زمان قالوا من يحكم ما أنزل الله أولئك هم الكافرون، قالوا كفر دون كفر ليس مخرجا عن ملته. فكل أكثر الذين يتحدثون الآن في الجمعيات وفي هذه المنظمات تقول الحكم بغير ما أنزل الله كفر، لكن من عهد ابن عباس من عهد الصحابة قالوا هو ليس كفرا. فنحن نحاول أن نبين أن التأويل يخالف ما يراه هؤلاء. فتطبيق الشريعة يحتاج إلى آليات، ونحن بدأنا الآن برنامج مع الحكومة المغربية والكويتية ومركزي، فبدأناه في المغرب ثم في لندن ثم سيكون في المغرب ثم يكون في الكويت، حتى نصدر بيانا في سنة في 12/12/12 هذا التاريخ، احفظوه من يريد أن يحضر الكويت، بلاغا للأمة في هذا الموضوع. إذا المسألة معقدة وتحتاج إلى شرح طويل للمنهج الذي نسلكه في هذا. والشريعة كما قال أخيه هي الكليات الخمس أو الكليات الست، المحافظة على إلى آخره. السؤال الثاني هو هل أجبر المسلمون، أو أعتقد سؤال الأخ هناك قال هناك جماعة صادرت الإسلام حسب ما فهمت، وبالتالي تتكلم باسم الإسلام. هو طبعا كل طائفة يمكن أن تتكلم باسم أي دين، لكن الإسلام لنحاكمه نحاكم على الكتاب والسنة وعلى فهم العلماء، يعني ليس فقط الكتاب والسنة، لكن الكتاب والسنة مفهوما من طرف من لهم الأدوات الفهم. هذا هو الإشكال. إذا قام الإنسان ليس له أدوات الفهم، هذا لا كلامه باسم الإسلام هو ساقط وليس مقبولا. السؤال الثاني هو الأخت التي سألت هل أجبر الإسلام المجوس؟ الحديث المشهور أو الأثر المشهور عن الصحابة سنوا بهم سنة أهل الكتاب، قالوا المجوس مثل اليهود والنصارى، وهذا مشهور في كتب الحديث جميعا. عندما نطالع كتب الحديث نجد سنوا بهم سنة أهل الكتاب، وافترضوا أنه قد يكون لهم نبي سابقا لم يدرك. فهناك موقف الصحابة الذين لم يقتلوا المجوس بل قالوا سنوا بهم سنة أهل الكتاب، وهذا مشهور في كتب الحديث، فعليك أن تراجع هذا. بالنسبة للبهائية، نحن كما يعتقد النصارى أن لا يؤمنون بالنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم، نحن لا نؤمن بالبهائية، لا نؤمن بوجود رسول ولكن رسول الله وخاتم النبيين. نؤمن أن محمد عليه الصلاة والسلام ختم الأنبياء، وطبعا في الكتب القديمة هناك أدلة كثيرة على أن ختم الأنبياء كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان الخاتم. لكن لو جاء شخص آخر وتبعته مجموعة أخرى، هذا الأمر يعني كما قال الإخوة لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي. قد يعتبر هنا موضوع مهم. قد تعتبر دولة بأن هذا مخالف للنظام العام، public order قاعدة قانونية، حتى في أوروبا وفي أمريكا هناك نظام عام. قد يعتبرون أن خروج هؤلاء ودعوتهم إلى دينهم يعتبر مخالفا للنظام العام. وهنا إشكالية النظام العام. ما هو النظام العام؟ ما هي حدود النظام العام؟ ما هو حدود الخروج على الثقافة المحلية؟ ما هو حدود ما يؤدي إلى الفتن وما يؤدي إلى الحروب؟ هنا موضوع مهم يتعلق به قضية قيام أهل دين بالدعوة لدينهم في مكان ما، في بلد ما، لأنه قد يؤدي إلى فتنة، قد يؤدي إلى حرب، قد يكون الناس في غنى عنها. هذا مسألة النظام العام public order، هذه مسألة مهمة جدا يمكن أن نشرحها فيما بعد، وهي تفسر كثيرا من الأشياء. كذلك بالنسبة للأزهر ويؤيد قتل المرتد. أولا، من هو المرتد؟ ثانيا، من الذي يقتله؟ ثالثا، ما هي صلاحيات الإمام أي الحاكم في هذا؟ هل هو من الأحكام السلطانية؟ أنا قلت في تعليق لي منشور على ما كتبه طه جابر العلواني بأنه من الأحكام السلطانية. هو طلب مني أن أكتب تعليقا على بحثه عن المرتد، وقال لا، لن أطبع كتابي دون التعليق، فكتبت بحثا طويلا مؤصلا لم أتفق معه في كثير منه في بعض الآراء، لكن قلت هو قد يكون من الأحكام السلطانية. ولهذا قد يكون ما قاله أخي الدكتور جمال بدوي بأن المسألة يعني ترجع إلى شيء آخر غير الارتداد. يقول إمام الحرمين إن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يداري المنافقين وهم مقطوع بالوحي بنفاقهم، ومع ذلك لم يفعل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم، لم يقتل أحدا منهم، وقال وهو القدوة والأسوة. الكلام لإمام الحرمين في الغياث. فالمسألة ينظر إليها في نطاق العالم الذي نعيشه، ما الذي تحقق من المصالح وما الذي تؤدي إليه من المفاسد. فنحن لا نشتم التاريخ، لا نقول كل ما كان عليه الناس كان خطأ أو كان غير صواب، بل نقول له مبرراته. الحديث الذي ورد من بدل دينه فاقتلوه. العلماء كالعين يقول يذكر عن عمر بن الخطاب أنه كان لا يرى القتل، ذكر ذلك العيني، وكذلك النخعي من التابعين كان لا يراه. ومذهب أبي حنيفة فيه ما يدل على هذا، قال لا تقتل المرأة لأنها لا تحارب، فكأنه جعل ردة الرجل هي نوع من الحرب. يعني هناك أشياء تقنية نحتاج إلى وقت لشرحها لكم في هذه القضية. إذن فلا نقول على الإطلاق كان الناس على خطأ ولا نشتم التاريخ، لكن نقول بالإمكان في العصر الذي نعيش فيه أن نطبق الأحكام على الواقع بشكل آخر وليس بالشكل الذي كان قائما. شحرور وما شحرور، أنا لا أتفق مع شحرور باختصار. الأخير جماعة ما أعرف
الشيخ الأكبر.
الشيخ الأكبر تكلم عن ما ورد بأنه حديث ولم يثبت، إن كل آية من القرآن لها بطن وظهر وحد ومقطع، يعني هذا الذي تكلم عنه. فظهرها ما ظهر منها وباطنها ما يظهر لأهل الحقائق، ومقطعها ما دلت عليه، أو يعني هذا الحديث الذي لم يثبت تكلم عنه الصوفية كثيرا، فهو من جهة حق ومن جهة قد لا يكون مفهوما للعوام. فالقرآن لا شك فيه الإشارات. يكفي أن ابن براجان في القرن السادس، يعني في القرن الخامس السادس، أو أخذ من القرآن بأن الصليبيين سينهزمون في اليوم الفلاني في التاريخ الفلاني لإرجاع القدس الشريفة، فكان ما ذكر. فالقرآن فيه أسرار قد لا يهتدي الناس لإسراره، لكنه يخاطب الناس بما يفهمونه. فنحن لا ننفي وجود أسرار في القرآن يطلع عليها الأصفياء وإشارات قد لا يفهمها كل الناس، لأن إشارة النص هي أمر لا يفهمه العوام. علي رضي الله عنه فهم إشارة النص وحمله وفصاله 3 أشهر، فقال المرأة حد يعني الحمل هو 6 أشهر. الصحابة بعد أن اختلفوا معه وافقوه وقالوا هذا كلام صحيح، لأن هناك إشارة النص. النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يوم معه رجل قال رحمك الله، عامر بن الأكوع، فقال عمر هل لا أمتعتنا به؟ يعني عامر بن الأكوع أنشد شعرا قال رحمك الله، قال وهذا في صحيح مسلم، فقال عمر هل لا أمتعتنا بعامر يا رسول الله؟ ما معنى ذلك؟ عمر فهم أن رحمك الله عامر سيموت، عامر بن الأكوع، ما أحد يفهمها، الصحابة لم يفهموا هذا، لكنه فهم من أحوال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عندما يقول كلمة هكذا أن هذه كلمة وراءها شيء لا يفهمه الناس. فهذه أمور تختص بالخواص، وبالتالي الأمر فيه طول. وفقكم الله. السلام عليكم.
Now I think the Dr. Brown is going to translate, and he said to the young lady that keeping the time, he said, "Excuse me, I'm sorry."
Shaykh Abdallah wants to talk about just to lend some comments to what was already said. The issue of how do we understand and apply the Sharia in the modern period, this requires a tremendous amount of research. It's an ongoing project. How do we understand Islam and the Sharia in the proper way? Because he cites Imam Shatibi from the 13th century that the Sharia is here for the benefit and utility of people, not to harm them. So we have to understand that properly. When we see people applying Sharia rulings that cause harm and not benefit, then this is the improper understanding. We need to apply the Sharia in a way that promotes benefit and not harm. And he gives the example of people who say, well, the Quran says that if you don't rule by what God has revealed, then you're an unbeliever. But he says even the companions of the Prophet, the first generations of the Muslims, said very clearly that this is not unbelief. This just means that somebody is sinful or something. It doesn't mean they're an unbeliever at all. And so we know from the very early period, the earliest period of Islam, that you shouldn't take these verses literally. And this gets back to what he mentioned earlier about his method of trying to figure out what the reasons behind the text of the Quran and the Sunnah are. And his center is working on this, and they've been working with the Kuwaiti government and the Moroccan government on publishing sort of a declaration about this. He says it's very important to understand that Islam is not just the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet, the revelation of God and the precedent of the Prophet Mohammed. It's the proper understanding of these sources, which only comes through the ulama, from the Muslim scholars. And not everybody can just go and look at these sources and have the correct understanding of Islam. You have to get them from the proper sources. He gives, on the question of the Zoroastrians, he says that the Zoroastrians, it was very clear in every book of hadith and in books of Islamic law that it says very clearly that Zoroastrians are to be treated just like Christians and Jews, and they were treated in every way like Christians and Jews, except on one issue, which I think intermarriage with Muslims was debated, whereas intermarriage with Muslims and Christians and Jews was not debated. But that issue really was closed for discussion even in the early Islamic period. On the issue of Baha'is, he says, in this situation, Muslims are kind of like Christians with Muslims, because Christians don't believe in the Prophet Muhammad and Muslims don't believe in any prophet after Muhammad. But he says that one way that that a Muslim state could deal with this issue is through the language of public order. And European, certainly in civil law countries, there's a very clear notion of public order. That's what, he doesn't mention this, but I'm giving this example. French bans on face veils and headscarves, these are based on notions of preserving public order, right? So he says that what public order is depends on a specific country and a specific peoples, and this has to be discussed by that country. What are the boundaries of public order? What infringes upon public order? What are threats to public order? It may well be that one religious group promoting some new religion is considered to be a threat to public order. The issue of the apostate, this is, of course, you can't just bring it up without discussing it. Who is an apostate? Who is responsible for punishing the apostate? What's the purpose behind punishing apostates? And here he goes back to earlier Muslim scholars from the 1000s, some great Muslim scholars, Imam al-Haramain al-Juwayni, for example, who said that the fact that the Prophet knew, and the Quran refers to a certain group of people known as the hypocrites, munafiqs, who everybody knew were not Muslims. They were usually actually trying to undermine the Prophet in Medina. And yet there was no doubt for the Muslims, because this came in the Quran, that there were these hypocrites. And he said that the Prophet never killed any of these people or harmed them. In fact, sometimes he even prayed for them. That fact suggests that it's not the issue of simply someone's belief and changing their belief that matters. There's a political dimension, and that's why this issue is sometimes considered to be part of the rules of authority, of the political authority, and not of religious authorities. And he gives examples of famous Muslim scholars, Badruddin al-Aini in the 1400s in Cairo, who gave examples of early Muslims like the second Caliph Omar, who rejected killing apostates, and gives examples of many Muslim scholars who... An-Nasa'i? An-Nakhai. Ibrahim al-Nakhai, another scholar, died 105 Hijri. On the issue of Mohamed Shahrur, he says he doesn't agree with Shahrur. There you go. And on the question of Ibn Arabi and the idea of the Quran having kind of an infinite multiplicity of meanings, I guess, he says this is based on the hadith of the Prophet, which is not considered to be reliable by Muslim scholars.
Weak hadith.
Yeah.
Weak.
And Ibn Arabi discusses it, says every verse of the Quran has an inner and an outer and a final reaching point. And Sufis love to discuss this hadith and talk about it. And no doubt the Quran does have these hintings and allusions to secrets. Events that are going to happen in the future, and sometimes people can understand these, and he gives examples in the life of the Prophet of this happening, but that this is really something that the elect, like, the spiritual elect and scholars talk about. It's not something that you go out and kind of preach to the masses about.
Okay, now, by this, I'm going to end the session, because it's supposed to have a break, and after the break to come for the second panel of discussions. I would like really to thank our Shaykh Abdallah bin Bayyah, for really honoring us with his presence. It's Allah decree that have him to be here. And Dr. Jonathan Brown for his great contribution, and Dr. Jamal Badawi from coming out of town to be with us here. And you can give them a round of applause.